You do not have the right to remain silent, and police can search your premises or vehicle without a warrant. This is now the law in my home state of Western Australia. I almost can't believe I am saying this here in Texas, in the United States, where if someone said that to you, you would get a very different response. But in my home state of Western Australia, as part of the new gun laws, the government has ruled in its final report into these laws that the right to remain silent and warrantless searches of vehicles and premises is valid because it is in the public interest. Now, this, of course, is in relation to if you are a gun owner or if you are suspected of having a firearm on you. So let's have a look at what they have said. In finding 42 of this report that came out this week in relation to Western Australia's gun laws, Section 370 of the Firearms Act 2024 offends against a principle of natural justice and therefore offends against Fundamental Legislative Principle 2, which is what the Parliament is meant to abide by when writing laws, in that it takes away the right to silence. However, the majority of the committee, consisting of the Labor MP for the government, the Labor MP for the government, and the Greens MP, all left politicians, finds that this provision is justified as being in the public interest. So they have just said, in black and white, that if you are a licensed firearm owner in Western Australia, or if they suspect you of having a firearm on you, you no longer have the right to silence because you are a public safety threat. Now, we are talking about a minority in Western Australia of the community who have just had what little rights we had left stripped off of them because they are a firearm owner. This is how the government is treating my community back home. I am wild. So we do not have a Bill of Rights in Australia. We do not have the Fourth. We cannot plead the Fifth if you are a gun owner in WA. We do get that right from other laws that is written by Parliament. And in this report, they've said the right to silence is a well-known and well-established principle of natural justice, which guarantees any individual the right to refuse to answer questions from law enforcement officers or court officials. It is regarded by the courts as an important common law right and a part of the privilege against self-incrimination, and is supported in Western Australia by Section 8 of the Evidence Act 1906. And then the very next line, however, that right may be supplanted by legislation. In other words, they can introduce other laws which takes this right off of the people. Did we vote for this? A statutory exemption may apply where the answers to questions asked are entirely within the knowledge of the person being questioned, and it is the public interest that those questions are answered. They're saying it again. During debate on the bill, when this bill was briefly debated in the Parliament, 12 clauses, if you've seen my other videos on how this same report, finding 1, said the laws were properly scrutinised in Parliament, and I have already disproven that. When there was a debate on this bill in Parliament, Minister Dawson, which is Minister Stephen Dawson, who represented the police minister in the upper house at the time, said, if police ask where are the guns and someone replies, I'm just not going to tell you, I think people would have the right to be concerned. If someone says the guns are over there when in fact they are not, or they are misleading the police, or unreasonably refusing to answer questions, I think it is an appropriate offence and penalty. These are guns, not lollipops. It is important that people adhere to the law. The majority of the committee, the report goes on to say, is of the view that the removal of the right to silence in these circumstances is justified in the circumstances because they're guns, not lollipops. Now, this is Section 370 of the Act. I'm just bringing it up for people who are following along very closely at home. Section 370 of the Firearms Act, offence failure to answer question. This is what they are looking at. And it says a person commits an offence if the person fails without reasonable excuse to answer any question asked by a police officer under the Act, or in answer to a question asked by a police officer under this Act provides information that the person knows to be false or misleading in a material, particular penalty, a fine of $5,000. So you will be fined $5,000 dues if you are a firearm owner and if you plead the fifth, because you no longer have that right under these new gun laws. Now, if you thought that was bad, let's talk about warrantless searches. Now, it is important to note that it is already the law and has been basically since 1996 when we had the whole firearms regime change from the Commonwealth down to the states because of Port Arthur, that any licensed firearm owner across Australia would be subject to random storage inspections, meaning a police officer can come knock on your door anytime without booking an appointment with you to come into your home to check if you are storing your firearms safely. Now, by safely, that means the firearms are separate, the bolt is separate, the ammunition is separate, magazine is separate. And you cannot use that firearm for castle doctrine or self-defense in any circumstances. Very strict storage law. So we are already in the situation as a gun owner in Australia where we are subjected to warrantless searches of our safes, but of course they can rock up any time. So as part of this report, Finding 40, Section 347 of the Firearms Act 2024 confers powers to enter vehicles or premises and to search for or seize firearms or related things without a warrant issued by a judge or other judicial officer, contrary to Fundamental Legislative Principle 4, which again is the fundamental legal principles that the Parliament is meant to adhere to when writing laws. However, the powers are justified to allow for immediate action to be taken in appropriate circumstances. Now, they have already used this section of the law when raiding so-called sovereign citizens. So I've already done a video about this. This blew up. It made international news. It was in the news over here. The fact that the police in my home state of Western Australia raided the properties of people who were deemed to hold so-called sovereign citizen views. Now, as I said, I have already been contacted by an individual affected who does not know how she's been accused of this. It's almost like we're burning witches in 2025, but this time we're sovereign citizens. And this headline here, police in Australia seize guns from dozens of owners who hold views rejecting government authority. So this is where the no warrant, they've justified those uses. They went and raided the citizen homes without a warrant. And they are allowed to do that now in my home state of Western Australia. Not a storage check, not a random storage inspection. Entering your premises or vehicle without a warrant because it is in the public interest. And in this case, because of your view, attitude, and opinion, which is also part of these new laws. If the government deems, the police commissioner deems, that you hold views, attitudes, and opinions that are, well, we don't know because the text in the bill is just that. Views, attitudes, and opinions will be taken into account when assessing if you should have the privilege of owning a firearm in WA in 2025. And so it's been deployed here, and they've written the laws in such a way that they can get away with it. I do not know where the uproar is from the justice side of town. The lawyers, the judges. I've seen a judge has already come out about the sovereign citizen raids and given his 2 cents. Where are the judges or esteemed lawyers or leaders for liberty in WA coming out and saying, you have just stripped natural justice from a minority group of people in society? Where is the uproar? Where are you challenging them on that? I'm trying my best to challenge as much as I can. And disappointingly, I had a look through the submissions today of who tried to fight these laws through the review process. I did, but my submission's not up there because I am not a part of the oligarchy. I'm not a approved representative organisation. I'm still banging on about that. But it just proves that it is an oligarchy, like esteemed Professor Augusto Zimmerman said. So where is a submission from the Law Society or the WA Justice Association or any of those groups? I don't know. They're not on there. The only justice group that I found their submission for was from the Aboriginal Legal Service, and they included in there a section about questioning the warrantless searches. And they've said, in their view, it is unclear how police formed the reasonable suspicion required by this section of the Act to enter someone's house and seize the firearm without a warrant. Because this is all the police need, reasonable suspicion. And then he has to write a report to the Commissioner explaining why, justifying his decision. And we all know, back the blue, no matter who, is the attitude of the top cop in WA at the moment. This has been the attitude all along, despite the atrocities that WAPO has inflicted on some of the people back there, the Floriette shooting, for example. I'm not letting them twist this story. And how they treated Ben Faulkner. We can't forget the 2020s early. So we are now at the point in Western Australia in 2025 where the government has decreed a certain section of society no longer has the same rights as our brothers and sisters because of our hobby, our passion, our requirement to have this tool, this inanimate tool for our job to protect our livelihoods. Now, I'll finish on this because it is relevant. Earlier this week, it's been a big week, the High Court of Australia did hand down its ruling into the Candace Owens visa challenge case. So Candace Owens, I don't even need to introduce her. She wanted to come down under for a speaking tour. I think Turning Point Australia, my mate Joel Jamal was helping with that. So she applied for the appropriate visa and it was denied. Now, the Minister for Immigration himself Minister for Home Affairs, intervened personally in this case to make the judgment, to make the decision to reject her visa. So she took it to the High Court of Australia, which is the highest court that you can take an issue to in Australia. And she took it up on the grounds of implied freedom of political communication that we do have loosely in Australia. We do not have the First Amendment. This is another issue. No 1, no 2, no 4, no 5. I'm trying to fight for people to realise we need it, but it's a hard battle in Western Australia specifically. So Candace took it to the High Court, and the High Court ruled, and it is in this judgment that the visa ban would be upheld because she would incite discord in the Australian community or in a segment of that community. In other words, people might talk about it. This is our free speech rights in Australia. We are in a very, very difficult position. And this is why I bang on about God-given rights. Because when we do not have our rights, which do not come, they are not given to us by government. It is our rights that restricts them, protects us from them. Because it always gets to a point where you need to be protected from your own government. It seems. Read a history book. I hope one day in Australia we do have the opportunity to write our version of the Declaration of Independence, so we have in writing that protects us from governments, protects us from the legal system as well at this point. Because the individual is the biggest minority, I think Ayn Rand said. I'm Kate Fantanell, Lady Liberty Australia. Thank you for watching. It is very trying times in WA. There's some other things from this blasted report that I'll put out. Please like, subscribe to my channel. Also, if you're interested in more news from WA, please follow my mate Jack out the back, Jack Carmody. He's on YouTube and Instagram. He's also trying to fight the fight and put the discourse out there while we can about these important issues. So thanks for watching again. See you soon.